Hare Krishna, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining us for this third broadcast of Matters of Principle. I'm joined by Krishnadharma Prabhu and Nrsimhananda Prabhu, and we're discussing the ongoing theme of, is there a needed step change for Srila Prabhupada's society to see it in full vitality and health? Krishnadharma, did you want to say any words by way of scene setting?
Well, as regards why we're here, I mean, I'll leave that to you. That's okay.
No problem. Thank you. Well, Nrsimhananda Prabhu, thank you so much for joining us. Maybe not everyone watching will know who you are. Could you give us the very quick background about, your role in the society and your history with the society and so on?
Joined in 71 in Chicago, initiated 72, started ITV in 79. We've been in LA most of that time before that, although sometime in New York. And started ISKCON television and shepherded that through for 30 years until the streaming services fulfilled the great mission, which was to be able to spread our philosophy wide and far without having to physically go places, and also introduce Krishna consciousness to people without them having to go places. So then I was involved in a number of different projects, including the Prabhupada Festival for 30 years in LA. And I was chairman of the Sabha recently, 4 years, the Spiritual Advisory Bhagavad Assembly. I'm on the Wills Committee, trying to get these leaders to pony up their wills and deal with secession. And I'm on the GPOC, which is the Global Property Oversight Committee with Gauranga, Gopal Krishna Maharaj, Jayapataka Maharaj, Tapan Mishra Prabhu, and Govardhan Prabhu, which is working with Shiva Shankar to get all the properties straight all over the world. There's thousands of properties and trying to get everything back in order. It was left quite messy over the years. So we're trying. Everything's a big challenge because the biggest challenge is dealing with each other. Learning how to navigate personalities, and then you always run the risk of the razor's edge of what is principle and what is relationship. And so it's been a very edifying experience throughout all these years. And I'm happy to be in the company that I'm with both of you and those people who are online.
Thank you. You mentioned being head of Sabha until recently. Over the years, there's always been some kind of checks and balances with the GBC. Srila Prabhupada talked about term limits and voting initially in the DOM. Later, there was the Temple President's meeting that might vet GBC resolutions and possibly, push some back to the GBC. And Sabha has sort of taken up that kind of role. How do we reconcile, on the one hand, ultimate managing authority with the need for them also to be held accountable or to get pushbacks?
Oh, well, that's pretty, in my mind, that's very easy. Prabhupada made significant changes throughout the years. He didn't put into effect, for example, the directions of management. He didn't push certain things, and then when marriages didn't work out, he stopped being.
Oh no! Hopefully he'll be back very soon.
Gone into the void.
Oh, there he is. He's back. We lost you there for 5 seconds.
So Prabhupada was ultimately very practical, and this idea, for example, of GBC for life, I think if he would have seen how it's worked out, he would have changed that. We get kind of, I believe, a little bit too much stuck in the material arrangements that Prabhupada made. Spiritually, certainly, there's those are immutable, but as far as the kind of governing that we do in ISKCON, which is at this stage has been very unaccountable, and then stops with this idea that GBC for life. It's now I can do any damn thing I want practically, as long as I don't ruffle the feathers of my fellow GBCs. I think that's dead. That idea has died a long time ago, but not in the minds of those who have the GBC seats. They believe that instruction is hard and fast. I do not. And many people do not believe that. And we need accountability. We need terms. We need, people who have the energy of youth in the GBC. We need to refocus ourselves on what the GBC actually should be doing most of the time, which is traveling and preaching, inspiring, and when they get together to develop the kind of global approach to spreading and broadcasting the message of Lord Chaitanya. It's just become, I think, far distant from what Srila Prabhupada had conceived in the first place.
So when you say far different, what are some of the things that you see as your primary concerns?
I think the GBC is making ecumenical decisions, spiritual decisions, which are best left to the individuals to find out through their study of Srila Prabhupada's books. Even the GBC has only a 50% or 50% can produce canon law. If 51% says it's this way and 49% says it's another, in the spiritual dynamic, it is so intensely personal, and it is uniquely individual. It's in fact it's our birthright to have a personal experience of God, and therefore to have an ecumenical body like the Vatican interfering in that relationship, whether it's relationship between who I choose as my guru, or whether I am able to, and if the Tatishta was the origin of the jiva or not. So many of these difficult questions that have been bantered about by many of the acharyas for centuries. I think the GBC just shouldn't have nothing to do with that. They should always be referring to our study and practice, simple study and practice that Srila Prabhupada gave us, and be giving that example, and be managing the preaching in a non-sectarian way. We become very compartmentalized because of, who's your guru, Prabhu? Oh, okay, so that's your guru, this is my guru, that's their style, this is my style. And, then I hang out with my guru buddies, just my guru buddies. We make a big distinction between Prabhupada disciples and non-Prabhupada disciples, completely artificial. Has nothing to do with Lord Chaitanya's, his reformation, that everything is based on qualities. It's not based on janma. I mean, we've got so many, in my mind, we've got so many things asked backwards that it has just appears that, preaching is getting bigger. But when you look in the grand picture, as you see where we are in the context of all the other spiritual groups, we're still very minor. We're perhaps well known in India, but outside of India, we're very much kept in the background of these kinds of spiritual profiles in the world. So, I just think we have a long way to go, and we have to make changes, not in the books, by the way, but we have to make changes to the way in which we govern, so it's accountable, so it's less bureaucratic, so it empowers the individual, and it reduces that great enemy that I think has been the scourge of our progress, and that is pride. Pride that we have so many disciples, pride that we have so much book knowledge, pride that we know so many shastras. And you look at all the different tests now that you have to take to be a guru, or just even to be a GBC, or look at the GBC college was established. We don't have one. I don't know if there's one person on the GBC that's come from the GBC college. it's mind-boggling how much we have complicated something that when we first came to Krishna consciousness seemed so simple. Chant the holy name, distribute prasadam, read Prabhupada's books, morning in the the ISKCON sandwich. I mean, it seemed very, very simple at the time. So those are some of my thoughts.
Thanks, Prabhu. Yeah, you're saying what I understood you to say to begin with is that as far as the management goes, like Damodara Prabhu mentioned the DOM, the Direction of Management, which Prabhupada wrote in 1970, and then you pointed out it was never fully implemented. But the very fact that Prabhupada, wrote that and then didn't implement it and came up with something else indicated that this was only a detail, and they were adjustable details, and he was adjusting them as he went along for various reasons, so that we can do so now. And the fact that the GBC themselves have now kind of latched on to the idea that GBC means for life, and there can't be any change, and that they alone are the ones who decide who can and can't be a GBC member, is something that Prabhupada would have adjusted if he was around, because seeing how it's been working out and how the problems that have arisen as they've tried to pursue that agenda of being the oligarchy, of being the the sole authority who decide who can be a leader and who can't, that hasn't been a very successful model. So you kind of recognize that Prabhupada would have adjusted that according to time, place, and circumstance. And you also pointed out how, like the GBC, they've overstepped their mark. They've gone beyond their remit by becoming like an ecumenical, becoming a religious and ecclesiastical kind of, more than that, a spiritual so-called authority. They've stepped into areas where they don't have any jurisdiction, like they now decide who you can and can't accept as your spiritual master, and that's a very personal decision. You pointed out that spiritual life is a very private affair. It's a personal thing. Everyone has their own relationship with God, with their guru, and what right do the GBC have to intervene in that, to get involved in that? And you also see that they've kind of increased the bureaucracy to insane levels and made everything very complicated. Really, their job should be very simple, to be like overseeing. Certainly, they have managerial control, but they shouldn't be executing that on a day-to-day basis, micromanaging, that kind of thing. And they should be traveling and preaching and inspiring devotees in spiritual life. That's their real role. But it's become something else, and it really needs to change. And you really feel that now we need to start looking at that and reevaluating and thinking about how we can get back to that model that Prabhupada envisioned. Is that kind of like what you were saying, Prabhu?
Yeah, it's kind of like that song, Back to the Garden,
Yeah, Joni Mitchell. Absolutely. But what steps do you think we can take? What practical steps can we now start taking to implement that? Because it's a fact that the GBC have established themselves as an oligarchy, and they seem impervious to any external pressures, any suggestions that should change. They just carry on, and nothing seems to change. So what do you think we can do?
Not much. We tried a lot. We tried a lot of different angles, and as during my term as the chairman of the Sabha, we felt that we were not just a twig. We were a significant group of twigs that would have some persuasive effect over the body. We found that even that as a group, we were really more seen, or at least our experience was that we experienced more that we were expected to basically just stamp approval to many of the resolutions. And when we would fight vigorously, it took, for the ones that we did win, it took an enormous amount of energy and time to overturn the GBC. And the whole thing on the Vaishnava Diksha Guru, we gave a very nice, very well thought out plan to the GBC to help bridge that difference between the IB and the GBC, and they needed some more time, more talking time. We gave them a very good presentation, and it was just ignored. Although they did later, a year later, adopt some of its principles. So no one likes to be spending their energy on something which they don't feel can produce the results. Eventually, you get tired of banging your head against the wall. So, to some extent, I think we have we've realized that, some of us have realized that the best thing that we can do to effect change for the GBC itself is to actually just set examples in our own service, and to a great degree ignore the politics and the edicts that come down from the heavenly abode above. And otherwise, what happens is we become almost like Ramachandra Puris. We begin fault finding left, right, and center, and that's not good for our personal spiritual life. I was asked to carry on as chairman of the Sabha, but I knew that for two reasons it was not a good idea. Personally, it wasn't a good idea because I was becoming hypercritical, because I was watching every little twist and turn in the way in which we were being dismissed and ignored. And that's not a good feeling, because you cannot help but feel resentment when that happens. So what happens to governing bodies who do not listen carefully to their constituencies is the constituencies, they themselves become apathetic towards the governing bodies, and eventually the governing bodies are just preaching to sycophants who really cannot carry out the mission. And that will result in a self-detonating pattern for the organization. It will either have to completely recognize that they are going down a path of failure, or they will keep going until that failure happens. But for the rest of the people who are watching this, I think we all have to be very careful to define and refine our spiritual life so that the Sangha that we keep is such that we don't become like them, like the people we criticize. I was at a retreat in Govardhan last November with Satyananda Swami and Burijan, and there the idea was that when you're doing a japa retreat like that, it's a 4-day retreat. You end up, I think on the 5th day, we chanted 64 rounds. There was a mantra that Satyananda Swami kept saying. He says, do the best that you can. Just do the best that you can. Never said, if you don't do this, if you don't do that. It was always do the best that you can, recognizing that every person has a different capacity for concentration, for patience, for whatever. So I think it's really important that everyone in the group not, invest themselves in the success or failure of a GBC, but in fact, make sure that your spiritual life is nourished and cherished by the people with whom you keep company. And in that way, you can probably do much more to helping. And of course, doing that, many people will shun the association of GBCs. But what's really important is your Bhakti Lata Bij. That's going to be our litmus test at the time of death anyway. So we have to be very, very careful not to become the very thing that we complain about.
Wise words, Prabhuji. I joined around just less than 40 years ago, so considerably less than both of you. I would say that I've been known over that time as quite a GBC loyalist and even apologist. And some of it's because I work in the field of leadership development. So I have almost a natural compassion for my client group. Oh, these people are underskilled. This is fixable with skill development and so on. Recently, and I think it's been the failures in child protection in particular, and looking at the causes of those, I've decided I actually can't just be a bystander here. The lack of effectiveness, the old boys network, is actually directly leading to these issues of abuse. The Anidesh Vapu case for being a classic case of lots of friends just looking the other way. 8 investigations, no action taken. So I looked to things like the 1986 50-man committee, who essentially staged intervention with the zonal acharya system and prevailed. They actually said, look, GBC and zonal acharyas, you can't keep behaving this way. And somehow it prevailed. Do you have a view as to whether intervention is possible, necessary? Am I overstating this? What's your point of view?
I think the train left the station, frankly. I don't think there's an equivalency to 1986. Got to remember, in 1986, we still had the vast majority of Prabhupada disciples still active in ISKCON. And today, that's a very different landscape. So to compare what we were able to achieve, or what we, when I say we, I would put myself with the part of those complainers, and I went to that gathering. But the fact is that forces of pratishta that is seems to be a constant theme that makes it difficult for others to hear what is actually what actually would be. I mean, take any GBC, pick one that you really don't like, pick in your mind. We won't name any names. And then say to yourself, gee, would there ever be a time when I think I could, work with that person and see their good side and not be alienated enough to be with them? Quite a number of GBCs come to my mind. I know they're not going to change. I know that they have no desire to change. And the older they get, the longer the nose grows, So I think that age, because of the aging process, people become rigid and they become defensive. So I don't think we have anything close to a comparable condition in our topography of ISKCON today that we had in 1986. I don't think that will work.
So we just chant our rounds, wait for divine intervention. Sorry, Krishnadam.
No, I was going to just catch those points that Nrsimhananda Prabhu is making about the GBC. That what I hear you saying, Prabhu, is that that it's a hopeless situation as far as change is concerned, because you think they become stultified and really kind of they really don't have any interest in changing. That you don't, and you were concerned. You're saying, well, that if you attempt that, the more you attempt to do that, then all you really become in the long term is a critic, like a Ramachandra Puri. If you're staring into the void long enough, you start becoming the monster yourself. So you're constantly looking at the faults, and you'll just develop the faults or become, very bitter and that kind of thing. Like we've seen many devotees have become. They've attempted to bring about change, they've failed, and then they've become bitter critics on the sidelines, and that's what you fear could easily happen if you focus too much on that, because you don't see that there really is much scope now for change. You don't think that what occurred in the mid 80s with that 50-man committee thing is any longer possible, that we can't get an intervention of that type now, because it's different. They were all God brothers then, and they obviously there was a parity between them and the GBC themselves, so they could speak to them frankly, and you were a part of that, and that was somewhat effective. But it's not possible now because they're gone. Most of the Prabhupada disciples, that's actually part of the problem, right? That they were alienated despite everything that happened in the mid-80s. We've lost them anyway, along with thousands of other devotees who took initiation from the so-called zonal acharya Mahabhagavats and everything else. But you feel the best thing is just focus on your own spiritual life. Be the change. I think what you're saying is that, okay, best way to change the world is to change yourself, because you are the world. So, best way to change ISKCON is you change. You are ISKCON. So, but, as far as the leadership goes, any direct attempt to kind of influence them is doomed to failure, because they're old, they're stuck in their ways. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. An old god, an old saint new tricks, and it's really just knocking your head on a brick wall. So you don't feel that's going to help. But I don't know if you feel there's anything we can do. I mean, you spoke about the DOM, and that was not implemented. And one of the things that we've been pushing for, because we've had a couple of meetings with the EC, with the GBC Executive Committee, and they've actually asked us, well, short of resigning, which no one's going to do, because we did initially ask that they all resign. We sent that letter, and that didn't go down massively well with them, and they're not going to resign. But then they said, well, what else can we do? So we're trying to push for certain things, and one of them is, okay, well, what about some external accountability mechanisms? I mean, we heard you just say that the Sabha has failed in that regard, and you gave up on that in the end, feeling that it's just wasting its time, that the GBC are just ignoring it. And that is the only kind of mechanism they've put in place. And as you say, they can just ignore it at will, and that's exactly what they do. So we're looking at, okay, well, maybe we can put in place something which actually has teeth and really can change, influence the GBC. Is there any possibility of that happening, do you think?
No.
To be frank, yeah.
and also, thank you, by the way. You really are very articulate. You're much more of a wordsmith than I am in expressing my thoughts. I'd like to import you into my brain. You'll be my spirit. But I think, reality is tough. If someone tells you have a terminal disease, or if you lose a limb or something, it's tough. It takes a process of grief. That's also there in the psychological annals, that it takes various forms at various times. First there's anger, then there's frustration, all the way to acceptance. I think to many of us have had to go through a process of grief to know that the ideal society to which we thought we were a part of just didn't manifest that way. I want to be clear. I do not believe that there are any GBCs who are insincere. I think all of them are doing really the best they can. And it's also true of the Sabha, which also supposed to have 35 members. I think they're all very sincere. But there's a group dynamic that takes place. We have an enormous challenge. We have people from all around the world, from different genders, different mentalities, to get everybody on the same page, to be Prabhupada came to America, and he lauded the Americans for their entrepreneurial nature, for their energy, for their commitment. Not all societies value that. In Bhutan, there's a ministry of happiness. I mean, it's not the same everywhere around the world. So we really have an enormous challenge that Prabhupada left us. And I don't doubt that every one of the GBCs is doing the best they know how to do, or that the Sabha members are doing the best they know how to do. It's just that I know how to do it better, if you know what I mean. In other words, each one of us will think, I know how to do it better and get the job done. And that's not the way a lot of people think. And so when you get these group dynamics together, it's very hard. They become very indecisive or become fractured with different points of view. And nowhere is that more clearly exemplified than in the issue of Guru Tattva. Guru Tattva is really that's the foundation stone from which we are having difficulty. We never got it really right. It's never been fully discussed. You've been the tip of the spear in trying to get the GBC to deal with the Guru Tattva issue. They keep on, putting it into kicking that can down the road or off to the side here, there, and everywhere.
Oh, we lost you sound-wise.
You're not coming through in sound, Nrsimhananda Prabhu.
We've lost you.
We can't hear you.
You might need to do something with your microphone.
Can you hear us?
I don't know that he can.
Individual responsibility.
Oh, he's dropped out. He's back. We lost you there for a bit. Can you hear us?
Yeah. Where did you lose me?
About a minute ago. Can you repeat what you said?
Yeah, I said this is you've been at the tip of the spear of trying to get the GBC to get what is the foundation stone of our problems resolved. That is Guru Tattva.
Yeah.
From there, in other words, where's Prabhupada? Are they transparent? Are they intermediaries? Are they Kanishtas? Are they Madhyamas? Do we have any Uttamas? All this stuff, you talk to a disciple who's totally absorbed in their guru. It's very hard to relate to because you know that guru for, so many decades, and you know where the secrets are hidden, where the moles and the warts are growing. I mean, it's very difficult because the disciples really have not been fully trained in understanding who is Srila Prabhupada and who are we in that relationship. And, there's a void that got filled up by this worship of Guru. And now you have, Jayapataka has some 50,000, disciples. I mean, there's, so many the gurus are mega, what do they call these in India? They call them mahants, big mahants. So without resolving that, the issues of governance also become are automatically unresolvable, because the GBC makes decisions and has made decisions politically based on the number of disciples of their members. So until and unless we get that somehow, which we will not get to that point of understanding, having a mutual understanding of Guru Tattva and ISKCON. That's my opinion. We haven't gotten there all this time, but we have each individual to study Srila Prabhupada's books and lectures and letters and what other people have reported about Srila Prabhupada, to a little bit of a lesser degree because it's filtered through memory, and let people come to their own conclusion, encourage them to come to their own conclusions about what is Guru. And then they can make their own choices, and then we won't have a body of GBCs feeling that they are the ultimate arbitrator of who is spiritually qualified and who is spiritually not qualified. I think this is really where we need to be concentrating our efforts. From the efforts of getting Guru Tattva straight, the governance will work itself out. But without that seed, I just don't see any hope for treating the limbs of the body, the ISKCON body.
Yeah, that's a good point, Prabhu. I totally agree with that. And just we've had a couple of questions, and earlier on you were saying about the individual members of the GBC are you feel sincere and doing their best. However, a group dynamic occurs when they come together. Just 35 of them. It doesn't seem to coalesce. That sincerity that they all have doesn't seem to manifest in their group decisions. And you mentioned earlier how they've got this quorum of 51%, and that 51% can come up with like canon, which is supposed to be the law for ISKCON and everything, and overall as a group it's not working very well. And even on the sub, a similar situation occurs there, where the individuals might be thinking, no, this is, even you're on the body and how something can be resolved and sorted, the body itself is not capable of doing that, even though you're a part of it, and it can be like a frustrating experience. But someone's just queried that, well, if they are sincere, if the individuals are sincere, then how is it that the kind of decisions they're coming up with don't reflect that? That they in, like you can see on the screen, the questions that Damodar's putting them there. So
let me answer that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because of course, it's not that I haven't posed that question myself. Prabhupada, if you read Prabhupada's statements, if you just look up sincerity, more than often, not always, but more than often, it's combined with intelligence. So you can be a very sincere, but you can be silly also. You can be very sincere and make decisions that are lacking in intelligence. I'm saying that I believe truly that people are sincere, but that doesn't mean they're intelligent. Intelligence is earned. That booty is earned. It's a manifestation of the Supreme Lord, after all. So the way in which I couch it, so that I don't become, again, like just criticizing from the outside, because I don't know what their background was. Like, for example, there was a sannyasi who's since been deceased, very wonderful, loved sannyasi in ISKCON. And once he told me that as a child, he was abused, terribly abused, sexually. And I could see how that was something that he kept to himself and was very careful about, and it affected his daily decisions. We do not know what's the karma and samskar behind each person. We can only judge if they're basically trying to show up and do the best that they can do. It may not be very good. It may look to us like the wrong decisions, or it may appear insincere. But for me to know that, I'm not the super soul, and I would give everyone the benefit of the doubt. So unless that somebody were so corrupted that they could do this year after year after year and put a pretense up, I'm just going to say that I respect their sincerity, but I don't necessarily respect their individual intelligence nor the collective intelligence, because collective intelligence unfortunately, is the common denominator of all the intelligences in the room. So that's why democracy doesn't work very well, because you're always going to the lowest common denominator. And this is what happens in groupthink. You're always going to come up with the lowest common denominator. And when they are half and half with things, they get mad at each other. So, yeah, sincerity, I think, is a little deeper than just being right or being moral. It's fighting. It's fighting against many of the anarthas, just to keep chanting 16 rounds a day and following the 4 regular principles, what to speak of making good decisions.
When Srila Prabhupada had that famous organization and intelligence conversation with Giriraj Swami, Sincerity was one of the answers that Giriraj Swami rejected, that Prabhupada rejected, that Giriraj had offered. Purity, sincerity. Now, I'm not disputing, because I think it's a nice ethos that you've described, give people the benefit of the doubt. And yes, how much of the issue is a character flaw versus how much of the issue is a lack of skill or competence, that may be a little bit subjective. However, I do think there are real world consequences to insufficient leadership. And there's a couple I'd like to kind of discuss here, and I'd like to go through a few more of the questions. One that's concerned me that has been going on for 50 years or more is if we consider the amount of devotees who at some point had their faith awakened by Prabhupada, committed themselves to the mission, heart and soul, and actually thought nothing of their future, just dive in, became a fully signed up member and, gave their heart and so on. We see there's an incredible number of people who at some point got disillusioned. And we might even be able to predict almost the lifespan of that sort of surrendered attitude. It may even be reducing, because at some point people bump into what they see as corruption or what they see as problematic. Yes, there might be times it's lack sadhana, but there's an awful lot of people who feel disenfranchised and disillusioned. If we consider the available talent to Prabhupada's movement compared to the actively engaged talent, that's actually a shocking stat. And in secular society, a leader who fails to engage those who might wish to be engaged gets fired. It's simply, whether it's a lack of skill or whether it's a character flaw, it's kind of irrespective. Phalena parichigate. You judge a thing by the fruit. The other one I'd like to mention that I think is catastrophic. There was a debate recently on the Vedic Inquirer about, if Kami schools, this was the language that we were using, the secular schools are slaughterhouses, as Prabhupada deemed them. What then to make of the record that we have with Gurukulas? Would there be an equivalent metaphor? The only one I could think of was Holocaust, which is something more gruesome even than an animal slaughter facility. Surely we can't defend the record of our society at disengaging people who are still committed to Krishna consciousness and this loss of second generation. I'd like to hear your thoughts on those, and maybe we can also pull out some questions then.
I agree with everything you said. I couldn't say it better.
So surely that means we can't just let it go and just wait for divine intervention.
I never suggested that we should.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, Krishna Dharma, you were coming in.
Earlier, different questions are coming up. There's a lot of questions around sincerity that individuals, one devotee is saying that sincerity, does it really equate to intelligence, or is it just knowing what is right and wrong, understanding what is truth and what is illusion? And then another one is also pointing out that as individuals, as you pointed out, while they may be sincere and left to their own devices, they might be very, very good devotees, but the dynamics of coming into this situation of being on a body which is the powerful kind of ultimate managing authority might, like the old adage goes, power corrupts. So within that kind of context, even though they may function very nicely as individuals, this whole sort of dynamic of the body kicks in, and they lose their moral compass because they become affected by decisions based around expedience and so many things which might not be connected to principles and truth, even though they themselves may not be a bad person, but they become, like we saw with the zonal acharyas, these young devotees had been around less than 10 years, all of a sudden they're placed on this gigantic pedestal, and obviously it goes to their head and it ruins them entirely. So it could be something like that as far as the individuals go, then it's the the dynamics that occur when they're on the body. So that's one thing. And then there's other questions around the Guru Tattva, which you brought up earlier. You mentioned how if we can just resolve that, then we will everything else will fall into place. That's the key. That's really that underpins all the problems that we have at the moment. That the GBC's approach to that is askew, is wrong, and if that can be corrected, then we'll start seeing things fall out. If they start allowing devotees to use their own intelligence, they simply make sure that they're equipped with Shastric knowledge, they understand Shastra, they hear from Prabhupada, they read his conversations and everything else, and then just leave them to it, and let them get on with it, rather than trying to control everything by this bureaucratic mechanisms they have in place. Then everything will fall into place. So those are the points. And one devotee, I guess we can come back to that question after, is asking whether what we have is unprecedented in terms of there being a lot of gurus working together, which I would answer because I don't think it is unprecedented, but we can maybe return to that. But just around the question of sincerity, there's a lot of questions regarding that. And do you think that it's a case of power corrupting, that the GBC body are falling into that trap?
Let me deal with the sincerity first. Separate sincerity from intelligence. If you're working with mentally challenged people, you really have to separate their sincerity from their actions. They can do really stupid things if they're mentally challenged, but they don't do it out of some kind of a desire to hurt somebody, but they can hurt people. So the sincerity doesn't really relate in many instances with intelligence in terms of even moral decisions. And people, of course, also who've been brought up in, for example, societies that have a lot of corruption in them, they'll come to a country which is based more on Judeo-Christian values, and they don't know how to actually work that system. It doesn't work for them. They're always looking for people who are taking the bribe or questioning the way in which things are done, that someone else is just in it for this or that. It's very hard to adjust. So sincerity is a very conditional state. And whereas intelligence is actually coming from the Supreme Lord himself. So I just would take issue with the idea that some people have that just because you're sincere means you know what is right from wrong. No, not all the time. And nowhere is that more evident than in war, when you see how soldiers act in the enormous passionate amphitheater of war, and they give a lot of wiggle room. Then they come back with for example, with a lot of PSD, and that again colors a lot of the way in which they act. So I don't think it's a good idea to conflate intelligence and sincerity, especially when Srila Prabhupada has more than once, many times, separated those two things for us. Just think about it. It's something that obviously would be very interesting and long discussion, and would require some research into Prabhupada's books. The second issue that you raised, remind me again, the second issue?
That was around Guru Tattva. Maybe we can come back to that in a moment. Because you were saying how that really is the key to all our problems, and the devotee has raised the question that is our situation unprecedented? Is there any examples where it's working already elsewhere, perhaps outside of ISKCON? But I would like to tackle that issue. But Damodara, I think, wants to come back on
it's just a really small thing on sincerity. So this is disputed, but etymology, sincera, devoid of wax. So apparently when the marble merchants used to ship low quality marble, they used to put wax in the cracks so that it hid the crack. And certain high quality marble was called Sincera, without wax. So it just means genuine. It doesn't mean more than that. It's the real thing. It's the real article, as opposed to there's any kind of pretense or any kind of falsity. Anyway, that's what I've heard.
Yeah.
There you go, Krishnadharma. Back to you.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I agree with Nrsimhananda Prabhu that sincerity and intelligence are not necessarily equivalent, and that you can be sincerely foolish, sincerely misguided, because you're not informed, you're not intelligent, and as you rightly pointed out, Prabhu, Nrsimhananda Prabhu, that intelligence comes from God, Dadami Buddhi Yogam Tam, and that is a product of you doing the right things in terms of sadhana. And because before Krishna makes that statement, the Dhammi Buddhi Yogam, prior to that, in those verses, those seed verses of the Gita, he's telling us what we need to do. Machita makata prana bodhayanta parasparam katayantashtamam nitjang. Tushanti Sharamasya, that we should be coming together and really studying and discussing Shastra. And in other words, informing ourselves, informing our intelligence, so that our sincerity is guided, and we're not, thinking, well, the best thing to do in this case would be to compromise on the principle. That there's another principle which is more important, that we're unity, that we've got to keep ISKCON together, and if we make, if we stand on the principle of what we think is shastrically correct, we'll end up in trouble. And so you're not getting the right intelligence, because I don't think you're really doing sufficiently what Krishna's asking us to do, which is, as you were saying as well, to connect with the Vani, with Prabhupada, with hearing from him, and discussing carefully together those instructions, and then you'll get the right intelligence to make the right decision. That if we stand on this principle, everything will be auspicious. It may appear by our mundane intelligence, if we make this decision, that things are going to go awry, but we know, if we stick to the principle of abiding by Krishna's direction, we're getting the right intelligence from him to do that there can't be an inauspicious result, despite what our material intelligence is calculating. So I completely agree that, sincerity is something a little separate from actually, having the right intelligence to do the right thing. It has to be properly guided by the Lord. So I like that point.
You want to see the future. The future is actually already here. It's the Alachua community, where Prabhupada disciples chose to gradually come together, form a community, free from the politics of the GBCs. They have a GBC figurehead, but their community runs by itself. They're not listening to any holy edicts coming down from above. And, that's pretty much what you're going to be seeing as we go forward, is places will, and actually Prabhupada was, this is what he wanted. He wanted that temples were fairly autonomous and developed their own styles of preaching and communities, etc. He was, as far as I read and saw and heard of everything that Prabhupada's done, he was a person who liked to keep things local, and didn't see that in his own Gaudiya Math that things went very well when they were when there was a lot of power invested in the GBC there. It didn't go well. I mean, he tried, but I'm certain that if he saw things weren't working, he would have done things differently, he would change them. So we just don't have that flexibility built in. And I understand why we don't. We're trying to follow Srila Prabhupada's instructions as closely as we can. So, yeah. Rasaraj has a question, yeah.
Why do you think that what you're describing in Florida is unique to Alachua because the whole movement is running like this, and it has been running for a long time. Every temple is independent, and the GBC had practically no influence on how the temple.
Let me repeat what he said.
Thank you.
Every temple has its own guru, and it's that guru who is running the temple.
He's saying that
Going on for so long.
He's saying actually for a long time, things have been running like the Alachua model, where temples basically, they run. They don't pay too much attention to the international body, and they basically maybe one or two gurus are predominant in those temples, and that's how things have been going on anyway for a long time. So that's kind of what we're looking at as the future unfolds.
That's not good.
He's saying, I'm not going to put a judgment on it, but that's the reality of where we're at.
Is that not like the Gaudiya mat, though? Where we've got all these little mats with their gurus in charge, and there's no unifying body. I mean, Prabhupada's idea, like the Acharya's idea behind the GBC, was that we would create a federation of, working together. Many sticks together are much stronger than individual sticks all over the place, fending for themselves. I understand the autonomy that Prabhupada wanted, but it wasn't just like, okay, they're completely set loose to do what they like, and then the GBC have no influence over them whatsoever. Would we not then lose that that united force that the Acharyas envisioned the international society of Krishna consciousness to be? The Vishvaraj Sabha, Vaishnav Raj Sabha, or whatever they called it in those days. How do we balance the two things?
You need good governance at the top, and if you don't have it, then you can't take the benefits of having that international federation. So we're attempting to give suggestions for better governance, better accountability. I mean, look at the finances, and nobody knows where the money goes. You look at Mayapur, how his issues have unfolded over the last decades, and there's not very good governance coming from the lack of accountability. If we had, for example, in our Sabha, we recommended that there be performance reviews every year for each of the GBC members, that they be graded on their performance, and that be made public. That the idea of being able to measurably try to assess the value of each GBC's performance. How many new devotees in their area, what projects, what other kinds of preaching, innovative preaching. None of that has been enacted, and that would go a long way to helping to make the preaching accountable, and therefore the Federation would have more faith in the kinds of recommendations coming out of the most elevated. As it is, it's been decreasing. The faith has been decreasing, and so we're moving towards this model over the years of each temple, thinking of its own best interest and not really looking to the GBC for very much inspiration or. There's a lot of what we call. Here comes Rasaraj. He's coming into the fray here.
That's okay.
So let's see if I can get him in here. There he is.
Jai Haribol.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for joining us, Prabhu.
So anyway, that's. I'm just saying that's where we're headed. We've been headed for quite some time.
We can only see your elbow now, Nrsimhananda Prabhu. It's a nice elbow. But that's what we got.
Trying to get there.
No, everything was okay.
It was, but then I lost that thing.
Okay.
Yeah. So what you're saying, Prabhu, what you're saying is that the problem, the reason why that the federation is not working, the confederation of temples and the GBC are actually becoming an irrelevance, is because of their failure in management. That they're not accountable. They're making dodgy decisions. They don't seem to be connected to what's going on. They don't seem to care.
Well, I wouldn't say it like that. It's
okay.
You have to measure by the results. I mean, look at the results of some of the issues regarding the various back and forth on some of these resolutions that have been going on that are very important to our society, particularly on the Vaishnava Diksha Guru issue and the child protection issues.
Right.
This has not been very dynamic leadership, and there's been, and I understand it. Being in India as much as I am, I understand that there's these different points of view, although I don't agree. I come from a place where, I believe you say zero tolerance, you mean zero tolerance. Whatever you take, whatever fall comes from that. Other people are wishy-washy about it from their different points of view. So, you're not going to get respected in Western countries for being that way. And in India, they don't really look at it. They look at it a little differently, some of the leaders. What are you going to do?
This is one of the sore spots. This is absolutely one of the sore spots, and it's something we've challenged the EC about. A couple of instances you talked about, U-turns on child protection matters. So the GBC makes a public undertaking, and then from pressure from the Indian Bureau or from the ICC, it absolutely does a U-turn just days later. The Vaishnava Diksha Guru would be another example. We actually had this conversation just a week or so ago, where we said, well, talk us through that one. Oh, well, maybe the decision was made under pressure initially. Although we said, didn't you have a Shastric Advisory Council recommendation based on some study? And then, some other pressure. But we really just need to take it all up to a Guru Tattva paper. But it looked like if there hadn't been some heavy, heavy, heavy lobbying from the Bureau and the ICC, that U-turn would have never happened. So it does make it look like the GBC is at the beck and call of certain powerful interest groups, no longer making principled decisions representing the needs of the entire society. Thanks, Rasaraj Prabhu.
So that kind of governance they lose a lot of confidence from people.
I want to say something.
Yeah, go ahead.
May I?
Yes, please.
Please, yeah.
Okay, so first of all, I just happened to be here with chance, in the sense that Nrsimhananda Prabhu walked in for lunch, and then he had a meeting. I facilitated it in my office, and he said, "You're welcome to stay." But I went out and I came back, and so then thank you for saying something, letting me say something. Listening to both sides, and I find the discussions very sincere, erudite, and deep. And I just wanted to say a few things. When I first heard about this committee of devotees who are moving to ask the GBC to resign, which was just a few days ago, my first impression was that, what is that going to achieve? Because if this Prabhupada once wrote a letter saying that there's no point in removing a temple president because it takes years and years to train him, and then if you remove him because he's not so good, then the guy who comes in, then you have to train him again from the beginning. So I think as individuals, I was thinking none of us are any better than anybody who is in the GBC necessarily. So I was thinking like that. But today then, when I was hearing this discussion, a couple of points came to my mind that I'm just putting it in which I can see somewhat the merit for the present move. Not that I'm saying it should be done or this or that, which is that I think everybody is agreeing, both Nrsimhananda Prabhu and all of you are agreeing that, without getting into whether people are sincere or whether they are intelligent or this or not, simply judging by the results, things are not going well, in terms of the GBC's performance. And then there is this issue, which I certainly told him also earlier, and myself and Nrsimhananda have discussed this for years and years, which is that unless, Prabhupada's position, not so much the Guru Tattva, Prabhupada's position is in the movement is properly established, we'll never be able to, correct anything else, because Prabhupada said if you're adding 10 numbers and you make a mistake in adding the first number, the total is never going to be right, no matter how correctly you add the rest of the numbers. Okay, so, but then I was thinking that one reason this whole thing is not solvable, the position of Prabhupada and then vis-a-vis Guru Tattva and vis-a-vis the Vaishnava Diksha Guru issue and all of that, is that the bulk of the GBC are gurus. And they act more in that capacity of as being gurus than than being GBC. You see, and and there has been from time to time the idea that these two posts must be separated, that Guru and GBC should not be the same, because if the GBC body is to discuss the Guru Tattva, right now, as a member of the Bureau, I'm in two different committees. One committee, so one subcommittee of Bureau that's dialoguing with the GBC about Bureau-GBC relationship committee, and one subcommittee that's dialoguing with Madhu Pandit and his group for trying to resolve peacefully the thing, because crores are being spent in India. So in both these groups, it turns out that the issue of the position of Prabhupada and Guru Tattva is one of the main topics that's being discussed. So it is there all over the thing. So equivalent to asking the GBC to resign would be to say that those who are gurus should not be GBC, then 90% of the people who are GBCs will have to leave. So you don't even have to ask the GBC to resign. This will be a more in-principle issue that, but then separating the two by itself has no meaning unless we follow what Nrsimhananda Prabhu was saying, that, we have to have a commitment to at least raise, in the Bureau I suggested that there should be ongoing topics of national importance, and we should just discuss them every time, whether we reach conclusion or not. Like that, this has to become an ongoing international issue. Because if you don't even recognize it at the GBC level, that the position of Srila Prabhupada and Guru Tattva is not clear, then you give a class anywhere, you got all these people who are following the gurus who will just throw you out of the room. So, and then the last point I want to make is that there was another important point that was made by both you and Nrsimhananda Prabhu, that we have to focus on Prabhupada's instructions, and we should wait for Krishna's instructions in the heart, and if you're sincere and intelligent, and we should do that. And that's always in the movement is there. Whenever we talk about Prabhupada, it's his Vani, you see. But an important point is that there is a person Bhagavat and a book Bhagavat. And we are emphasizing the book Bhagavat, but there's also the person Bhagavat. Prabhupada is sitting there in Murti form in the temple, and he is actually here running the movement. And the movement is going on regardless of, just like, for example, if I'm just an ant in this room, I may be very busy thinking that, in this room, what I'm doing is important, I'm important like that, but the owner of the room is doing his own thing, and I don't even count. So we may not even be actually members of the ISKCON movement that Prabhupada and Lord Chaitanya are actually managing and spreading every day. So and we may be thinking like so I think we will be missing the point greatly if we think we're supposed to run ISKCON and we're supposed to understand Prabhupada's instructions and meditate and be inspired by him. Whereas it's the other way about. Prabhupada is running this movement, Lord Chaitanya is running this movement, And we just have to know that we have to be his assistants. From that viewpoint, we don't even know how many people are actually part of ISKCON, no matter how much busy bee we are and how much we think we are, in ISKCON very important. So I'll wrap up by saying these are the 3 points. That one is that asking more than asking the GBC to resign, whether it will be useful to make the in principle issue that the Guru and the GBC position must be separated, because the GBC has to deal with the Guru issue, and most people are Gurus. And then, if those people resign, which will be like 90%, then if you form a new GBC, it must be on the condition that the Guru issue must be declared. We may not be able to solve it, but it must be declared as an open issue that is on for regular discussion. It's one of the top the issues that the new GBC commits to solve. Then only this idea of separating the Guru from the GBC actually has sense. And then I just also want to say that we must also understand and present the person Bhagavat, who is extraordinary, and he can explain things that are in his books, better than we can understand from his books. So, and he's here. For me, he's very real. I told someone, Prabhupada is more real to me than my own body. And in BI, for example, the particular scientific work I'm doing, which was not done before, me in the movement, which is actually to bring the concept of, there were 3 approaches very quickly. One is that, synthesis of science and religion. That I will follow. Another group followed the idea that we should kick Darwin in the face and we should disprove evolution and all of that. But both these groups, and there are instructions in Prabhupada's thing to justify both points of view and attempts, but both of them actually don't question the correctness of science in their own domain, which is the study of matter. Nobody in the movement ever stood up and said Newton is wrong, Einstein is wrong, their theories are wrong, they've got better theories based on Bhagavatam. That's possible, and Prabhupada wrote about that in Bhagavatam, in 3rd canto. And so I brought in this idea that, and I didn't bring it actually, I didn't even know such a thing existed. So without going into detail, let's say that somehow Prabhupada just made me understand and do that. But in this, bringing this concept of matter from the Bhagavatam within science to change science from within, so that it's upward compatible with theism, whereas current science studying matter is not compatible with theism. I find that I don't do anything, everything is coming from Prabhupada on a daily basis. Many people are, just now one senior Prabhupada disciple wrote to me saying, 44 years you have been saying that you are doing this and breakthrough is not coming. I'm beginning to think that, this is just, not a real thing. I said, you can say whatever you want, but if Prabhupada gave you $1 billion and said, keep it, you don't think you're rich, or you don't think it's my money, and you don't think Prabhupada wants me to spend it. That's foolish. I'll have to wait till Prabhupada says how to distribute it. So our job are custodians of, whatever he has set up, the books and this knowledge. And I think Prabhupada's, the person, is terribly, terribly, terribly missing in the movement. Just last point, I met one devotee some years ago. I was sitting in the Bombay temple lobby. He came and said, Haribol Prabhu, please, your message. And I said, okay, what do you want? Are you going to America or what? People usually say this to me before they get their visa. He said, no, Prabhu, I'm running a Bhaktivedanta program in Thane and I've got 150 people. Please bless me. I said, what is that to bless? I said, Prabhupada is there, pray to him, you get his blessings. And then the conversation went. And to my great shock, he actually asked me, do you really think that Prabhupada is there? And this person is initiated, he's running a Bhaktivedanta program for 10, 20 years. I said, it was a shock to me. I said, what do you mean Prabhupada is there? He said, I don't think any one of my God brothers, anybody thinks that Prabhupada is there. We just think it's something we have to do daily. So I just think these are some important points.
Thanks, Rasaraj Prabhu.
Thank you. Yeah,
thank you. And maybe could you say a 10-second version of who you are, just because people may not know?
Oh, well, I was working in Detroit, I had my own computer company. I might have been the first Indian to form a computer company in America. In 79, 78 summer, I got Prabhupada's book. 79, I joined in Detroit Temple. And I was initiated by Jaitirtha, and then we know what happened to him. And then somehow Prabhupada inspired me to move to BA, and I moved to San Francisco. And I'm now heading up the BA in Bombay and San Francisco, and I'm also a member of the GBC deputies, and I'm also a bureau member, a trustee of ISKCON in India for a long time.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and appreciate you joining us for the podcast. Over to you, Krishna Dharma. It looks like you're gearing up to share something.
I just wanted to make sure we captured those points you made there. That Rasaraj Prabhu, we're very privileged to have your association. Thank you very much, Prabhu, for sharing that. And that that rather than asking the GBC to resign, we should think, okay, it's better rather to retain people and try and rectify the situation, because could any of us as individuals do better? And Prabhupada's mood wasn't so much to remove, but it was more to try to help the person if there's some problem, and keep them in post. And then you said that really what we need to do is to take off some of the hats. That what we see on the GBC is that they're wearing multiple hats, especially the hat of Guru along with the hat of GBC creates a conflict of interest. And if we were to somehow resolve that, and rather have like GBCs who have perhaps an exclusive role as a GBC, certainly not as a Guru as well, then we would automatically see 90% of them going, because that they are gurus, and they think more with the Guru hat than they do with anything else. And that's not helpful in the role as a GBC. And the other thing you're pointing out is that Prabhupada is here in person, and that it isn't just his Vani, but he's guiding the movement. And we may think that we're doing things in ISKCON, but we're like a football player who's grabbed the ball and he's outside the lines and he's running with the ball, thinking I'm going to score a goal here, but he's not even on the pitch. So it could be like that we're not actually in the ISKCON, which Prabhupada and Lord Chaitanya are running and guiding, and it's a happening thing, and Prabhupada's a living person and he's present now. So I think those were the 3 points you made, and I appreciate those very much. And I just wanted to say that as far as that goes, us running outside the pitch, is it not? I mean, the only possible way we can do beyond the pitch is to understand what is the desire of Prabhupada, which I think is conveyed in his books. And that that I think primarily we need to really be connecting with that and understanding his desire, so that we're not.
Why only in his books? He can also convey personally.
Are you suggesting, like, from within the heart, that he speaks to us? Are they frozen? I think we might have frozen. They might have frozen. Yeah, they've gone.
Yeah, I just wanted to. Oh, they're back.
Yeah.
Did you catch the question there? I think Krishna Dharma Prabhu was asking. So, are you saying we can't load the question again, KD?
I was just saying that how can we understand what the person Bhagavat wants, especially in his so-called absence? I appreciate the fact that. The Guru never dies, that the Vaishnava never dies, he's present and everything. But he's present in sound. He's present in his instructions.
No, that I didn't say. I'm saying that he is personally present. So yes, I agree that his books are, he has given all the instructions we can read, but he can also tell. We shouldn't discount that. He's here.
Okay. Thank you.
And how he can ask, now, how do we know who is Prabhupada telling, anybody can say, Prabhupada is telling me this. Phalena parichate. That must be, someone told me that. Prabhu, everybody can say that Prabhupada, the person is telling him something. So I asked him, do you agree that getting an MBA from Harvard is good? And he said, yeah, very good. Do you agree that you can get a good job if you're a Harvard MBA? He said, yeah, sure. Then why is it that in Bombay everyone is not going around saying I'm a Harvard MBA? Because your bluff will be called in 2 minutes by people who have studied at Harvard. They'll say, oh, really? Which year did you study? You are part of which student club? So similarly, if we actually have people who are, we actually develop a critical mass of, people having this understanding and relationship with Prabhupada, everything will become all right. It's not a sentiment, it's not sahidya, it's not imagination. As much as Prabhupada's books we promote, we should also promote Prabhupada the person.
So I'd like to maybe challenge the idea that there's just not other qualified people around to lead. As someone who works in the field of leadership development, this is a learnable competency. When Prabhupada established the GBC, maybe most of them had been members 3 or 4 years of the movement, and yet Prabhupada entrusted and empowered them. Many of them have not undertaken a significant amount of education. They've just done the best they can using their intuitions, maybe referring back to Prabhupada's letters. But I don't think many have learned how to do organizational leadership. And there are now hundreds and thousands of devotees around the world who've been around for 40 years, 50 years, who've experienced running temples. I just don't accept that there aren't eligible people who would be better equipped, to do those roles. And I think we need to see a commitment to education. Someone made the point in the thread that if they are sincere, surely they would consider resigning if someone made the case that there's been such a catastrophic failure in certain areas. Where does the sincerity come in if you say, despite all the evidence of the failure, we're going to cling on to the position? That's worrying, especially if they're also resisting undertaking the competence gaps, developing the competence gaps that are evidenced. I worry about those things.
Again, I'll give the example. People in psychosis, they act in different ways. Just that people are conditioned by different events in their life or by things that they've experienced. So, sincerity can be the realm of a crazy person. You can be absolutely sincere about going out and shooting up a crowd, but their intelligence, of course, is in the mode of ignorance. So that's true for anybody. And I don't think that we again can say for 100%, we can say they should have known what they're doing, but they can't. I know too many people who have expressed, I can't fast today. I just can't do it. I know they're very sincere, but they get low blood sugar. They get something physically happens to them, and we make excuses for it. We don't think that they're insincere because they break a codicy or something like that. At least we shouldn't. But with mental diseases or mental conditioning, we don't have that kind of leniency. And I think we need to develop more of it because this material world is immeasurably mutable, and the mind becomes extremely, as you get older particularly, the mind becomes fossilized in many ways, fixed in its attitudes, very difficult to change. People don't realize what's going on up in their gray matter. And there was a great film called Brilliant Mind that gave the audience an experience of what schizophrenia was like, because they bought into the visions for the first half of the film. And when you realize that those visions were not actual real people, they were illusions in the mind of the mathematician, you immediately felt a lot more compassion because you understood that mind was being haunted by these various visions. So it's very the line between being sincere and being intelligent, I think, is extremely well defined. And intelligence there are many intelligent people who are insincere, for example.
Thank you, Prabhu. I'm mindful that we're closing in on the 90-minute mark, so it might be time to do our concluding remarks. That's not to say this is the one and only talk that we'll have. We obviously love to invite people back as well, but I might invite our guest initially. Do you have any closing comments you want to leave our viewers with? Any summing up recommendations?
I think Rasaraj Prabhu is very wise. He's given a possible scenario which could be promoted and lobbied, that the idea of conflict of interest which exists in the law also exists in terms of the way in which we have structured our management and allowing gurus to be GBCs. It's a very non-evasive manner in terms of being judgmental to ask for no conflicts of interest. And there's obvious conflicts of interest. If someone could develop a paper of the many conflicts of interest that one would have as a GBC guru, it may go a long way towards gradually getting rid of the idea that a GBC can be a guru, and that would be a disqualification for them being a GBC. I think it's an excellent idea.
Thank you. Rasaraj Prabhu, any closing comments from you?
No, sir. Thank you. Thank you for letting me speak. I appreciate that.
No, thank you for joining us. Krishna Damaji, any closing comments?
Yeah, I just like to pick up on the point about Guru Tattva being, critical. It's good that we're now discussing that, and that we need to understand Srila Prabhupada's position in relation to the movement. And a devotee, Anu Kanupriya, earlier mentioned how is our situation unprecedented, and I mean, it isn't. Obviously, there's other sampradayas, the Ramanuja and the Madhva sampradaya, and they've had to, grapple with the question of having this acharya, Madhva and Ramanuja, and then having a succession of gurus descending from him and how they've dealt with that. I think we could learn some lessons, because I do feel that I agree with the point that we're not really establishing Prabhupada's position in the movement properly, and that he needs to be the primary Shiksha guru. He needs to be, the person who all of us are taking our guidance from, whether that be in person, as Rasaraj Prabhu suggested, or via his instructions. So I agree that that's the critical issue that we really need to resolve. And then we can start from there. I think everything will start flowing, because spiritual understanding is at the top, and then everything comes after that. So if we haven't got that right, then as Rasaraj Prabhu was saying, if you start off with your initial axiom 2 + 2 = 5, and then you go into this enormous calculation and formula based on that, the whole thing is going to just be a mess. So if we haven't understood that fundamental point, and he's saying how they're discussing with Madhu Pandit, who's got this idea of Prabhupada Acharya, he doesn't call himself a Ritvik, they call themselves like Prabhupada Acharyas, followers of Prabhupada as the Acharya, and also the ISKCON Bureau is now trying to work out the issues of Guru Tattva. So I think that's really where everything needs to start, and that's the problem that we're facing right now. I think we're actually usurping his position with so many of these individual gurus and temples that are running underneath a particular guru, and so I liked those points that were raised today, and I think that we should try to pursue this discussion further and see what answers we can come up with.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. I did promise Nrsimha I'd ask that one question about the Gurukul report. So obviously we had the recent inquiry, Naveen, and we had Cap on last time talking about. And then we seem to get quite a rosy picture from your visit to the Vrindavan Gurukul. What was behind your writing that?
Well, it's the first time I had met Radhakant, who's in charge of that project. And I really, had a meeting of the hearts. I really felt him as a really sincere and dedicated servant. So I thought that while I was there, I would get an opportunity to kind of do a little snooping and sleuthing. Then when I wrote the letter to kind of assuaged some of the concerns that I'd heard were bubbling in the GBC, and really was encouraging members to come there. Then that, as you saw, that sparked a response from Sudapa? Sanika, which I thought his response was quite eloquent and it made very good points. So I saw the response to that from Pancharatna. And then I saw the response again from Sanika to Pancharatna, and I felt that Sanika's response had many salient good points in it, and I was hoping that he would be there would be a response, because I supported the ideas that many of the ideas that Sanika made in his second letter. Especially on the issue of, how could he really know what's going on there, and how is he relying upon, he was only there a day, and how could he rely upon a report from someone who had dubious credentials, etc. And I felt all of that was reasoned and deserved. When the response did not come, I realized that he again was being treated and abused, frankly, by a dismissive attitude on the part of the CPO director in India, the ICPO director, which is Pancharatna. That is not right. It should not be tolerated. If you're going to look into something and you're going to defend something, you better well give people who are interested and care enough to talk about it the time and honor them. So this was a dead giveaway to me. And immediately I started to make calls. What's going on? Why isn't Pancharatna responding to this letter? And I got the same kind of attitude as usual, that why should we? We don't have to. He doesn't have to. He's doing his job. I said, well, he's got to answer the allegations and some of the points made. Otherwise, where does the confidence come? And it just stops right there. So I think that it's a farce at this stage. The idea of the Indian Office of Child Protection not being responsive to somebody who not only cares enough about it, but has intimate knowledge of it. And that's where we are at today, where I don't have confidence in that office, because they have dismissed the very critics who are looking for answers. And those are the critics that actually need to hear, for the rest of us, what those answers would be. And if they don't give answers, it means they don't have them.
Thank you. That's a really helpful clarification, Prabhu. Thank you, everybody, for joining the call today. Thank you, listeners and viewers. And if you found it useful, please keep the chat going and share. We'd like to have more and more people, thoughtful devotees, as Srila Prabhupada referred to them, really exercising their grey matter on how we can serve his society, his mission the best. I'll close the... sorry.
Thank you. I want to thank you, Damodara, and also I want to thank Krishna Dharma for keeping this going. And I certainly pray and hope that there's some tangible results that happen.
Thank you. I'll end the broadcast now, but maybe we can chat for a little bit afterwards. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.